Hello and welcome to the Doofcast, the official variety podcast of doofmedia.com. My name is Scott Daly, and it's time to release the Kraken.
And I'm Matt Freeman, and apparently it's actually Kraken.
That's complete nonsense.
Yeah, who's to say?
Definitely not IMDb. This week, Matt, it is part 6 in our ongoing series discussing the films of Gore Verbinski. Can you believe it? We're 6 out of 10 already.
No, it doesn't seem like that much.
No.
But I think that may at least in part be because so many of the movies have felt so wildly different from the others.
Yes.
Except this one doesn't feel very different from Pirates of the Caribbean.
Perhaps not. Yeah, we head back to the Caribbean with Verbinski's 2006 follow-up subtitled Dead Man's Chest. So we're going to be doing a full review and analysis and discussion on Pirates of the Caribbean, Dead Man's Chest. And then I want to wrap things up this week talking about some TV, Matt. I saw a Twitter thing, and I said, that seems fun. Let's do that. And the Twitter thing is, I'm trying to remember how it's worded, the 4 TV shows to get to know me. And I decided to make it 5 instead of 4 because the only reason it's 4 is because Twitter's stupid and you can only put 4 pictures up at a time. So I decided to upgrade to 5. It has nothing to do with the fact that I was having a lot of time just picking 4. Nothing at all. So we're gonna wrap up our episode talking about some TV and some TV that's important to us. Play a little fun game at the end of this week's episode.
I think I've watched 5 TV shows.
Oh my God. You stop it. You've watched many TV shows.
Yeah, I guess so.
All right. You want to just jump into it?
I do.
Let's talk about Pirates of the Caribbean, Dead Man's Chest.
How much do you know about Davy Jones?
You owe me your soul. And it's time to pay up.
If there was anything could be done, well, there is a chest.
The dead man's chest.
To find it, you must sail to the end of the earth and beyond.
We have our heading.
Matt, what is this movie all about?
Jack Sparrow races to recover the heart of Davy Jones to avoid enslaving his soul to Jones's service, as other friends and foes seek the heart for their own agenda as well.
This movie was once again written by Ted Elliott and Terry Rosso. Of course, it was directed by Gore Verbinski, stars Johnny Depp, Orlando Bloom, Keira Knightley, and Jack Davenport, who comes back in an increased importance role as former Commodore Norrington. Mm-hmm. And we also get Bill Nighy as Davy Jones. So we got rid of Jeffrey Rush, and we got Bill Nighy now. I think that's a fair trade, right?
Yeah, I think that's about even odds, yeah.
Yeah, there's also a Stellan Skarsgård appearance who plays Bootstrap Bill, which is Will Turner's father, who is now a fishman.
Yeah. I mean, this is just sort of an embarrassment of riches, really.
Absolutely. So, Matt, what did you think of Dead Man's Chest?
I like this movie a lot. I like the other one more. I'm sorry, everyone. I like the first one more. But this is an incredibly fun movie, and I think that after the success of the previous movie, Verbinski really got to just go as big as he could possibly think to go with this movie. And it succeeds on that level, certainly. What did you think about this movie? I want to hear what you thought about this movie.
I love this movie. I love these 2 movies. I think I love this one and the next one more than I love the first one. For very interesting reasons that we'll get into here. I think we'll have to kind of leave this conversation on a cliffhanger, just like the movie does, to really get into this. But I think the first movie succeeds on the back of an incredibly tight script. We talked about this. Just incredibly tight, well-framed 5-act structure. With good characters and a well-directed movie. This is a director getting to go insane, and the result is not nearly as tight of a script. This is a very kind of clunky story, actually, when you get right down to the story of this movie and the next one. It's very clunky. This is a movie that it's very obvious that they did not, whether or not they knew there was going to be a sequel to the original Pirates of the Caribbean, they had not planned for it to be the first movie of a trilogy. And so this suffers from a lot of the trilogies you see from, the same thing with The Matrix, arguably with the original Star Wars, that the first movie is a very independent, on its own movie that functions by itself. And then the second 2 movies are basically just one long story. In fact, they filmed this one and At World's End back to back. So it's basically one movie that they divided in half.
Yeah, it makes sense. And I think these two, the two sequels, feel more tonally similar as well to each other than they do to the first one.
Yeah, but I love it because Gore Verbinski just gets to do, you're absolutely right, he gets to do whatever he wants. And he gets to do whatever he wants on a character design perspective. Like, in every way that Pirates of the Caribbean was Verbinski finding a way to make art through the resistance of suits who thought he was insane, these two movies are, I've won. Dead Man's Chest and At World's End are my victory laps, in which I can just go hog wild and they're not going to say no to me and I'm going to do everything. So it's giant, absurd set piece after giant, absurd set piece. It's crazy character designs. It's mental plot beats. I think the what I forgot characters' names. The Elizabeth Swann and Jack Sparrow will they won't they of this movie is like my favorite fucking part of it because it's just so crazy.
Yeah.
And I love it. I love everything. The only thing I'll say that I don't quite like about this movie, and I'm sure we'll get into other stuff, I think Will Turner himself gets a short shrift in this movie. I think Keira Knightley has a very obvious arc going from this movie into the next one. I think they've given Jack Sparrow a really good one too. It just feels like they're not quite sure what they want Will Turner to do. And I think the third movie does better at this because they kind of get Will's whole thing is going to be with his father and the relationship with his father, but there's just not as much time for that in this movie. So he just doesn't seem like he has an arc in this movie. He's just there until the end. Whereas Elizabeth Swann is going through some stuff. Jack Sparrow's going through some stuff. Norrington is going through the most amount of stuff.
Yeah.
So I that's like the protagonist kind of gets the shorthand of the stick is a bummer, but everything else works so well that I have trouble caring.
Yeah, sure. I don't disagree with any of that. I think I would say the main reason I like the first movie more is simply that the beginning of that movie is actually quite slow.
Sure.
We get to know everyone for a long time before things really pop off. I mean, you could even say that like Jack and Will's first sword fight is almost just like an appetizer because things still haven't really escalated at that point, right? We're still getting to know everyone and understanding everyone's relationships and understanding the characters sort of, in a well-rounded way. And this movie doesn't give time for that. And you could argue that, hey, we already did that in the first movie. We don't need to do that again. And maybe that's true. Like maybe that's totally fair. And maybe I shouldn't expect this movie, to do that. And furthermore, I think that with the amount of fun set pieces that they jam into this movie, there simply wouldn't have been time unless they cut out some stuff. And I don't actually think that I want them to cut out some stuff because I think it's all very fun. It's just sort of like the ratio of extremely Byzantine plotting to character investment is too high. And thus I don't feel it quite as much. Like when Barbossa gets shot at the end of the previous one of Black Pearl, I felt that, that was an emotional moment. The end of this one, I don't think I cared too much
when Jack Sparrow. I mean, here's what I'll say. I didn't care about the Jack Sparrow being swallowed by the Kraken moment. I think the moment where Elizabeth fakes him out and locks him to the mast is the best moment in the movie because it's full reveal of exactly the type of person that Elizabeth Swann is. And I think he looks at her and says, pirate, right? Yeah. It's perfect. It's perfect. I felt that was wonderful.
Now that I'm thinking about this, I think honestly, the first time I saw this movie, I was really upset that they killed off Jack Sparrow. And so I did but I did that immature thing where my reaction was to be mad at the movie instead of inside the frame of the movie. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So I might still be processing some rather childish emotions there. But no, I mean, I love that. I love the way he says it. I love that there's almost an appreciation, but there's also a bite of anger behind it.
Yeah.
I love that whole thing.
Yeah, he's definitely impressed with her as well as furious that he's been hoodwinked. Yeah, I mean, we'll just repeat ourselves from last time. Johnny Depp continues to just be incredible in this character. He understands this character. He knows this character. I did detect like a little bit of playing it broader, just a little bit in this movie. There are moments in this movie that did make me roll my eyes. I think every time they directly reference something from the first movie, I kind of rolled my eyes a bit, like with the slap that Turner gets instead of Sparrow. I kind of just rolled my eyes at that. But for the most part, I love it. And I think Johnny Depp is doing incredible work once again.
Yeah. I mean, really everybody is. I think even Orlando Bloom is just like kind of what he needs to be in this movie. In fact,
Yeah.
I would say better than the previous one.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, I think in the previous one, I don't know if I can articulate it exactly. It just seems like there's more to play with here because he is being like full on pirate mode in this
Sure.
one, whereas in the previous one, for like more than half of the movie, he's sort of being repressed. And I think the way Orlando Bloom plays repressed is literally just like muted. And
just basically Legolas.
yeah, basically Legolas. But then when he's able to be, you know, a swashbuckling pirate, it's like, oh, okay, there's a character here. That's my feeling. But
I think part of that actually is he has something to do that doesn't have to do with Elizabeth for the first time in the series. Like, I think the introduction of his father was such a brilliant move of bringing back Bootstrap Bill in the service of Davy Jones. Gives Will Turner someone else to worry about and to care about. And so for the first time, he's not just rushing across the seas to save Elizabeth again. It starts that way, but it gets more complicated. And like I said, I think that the third movie gets into this even more. I really appreciate that they gave him that as well.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. I think the scenes that he has opposite his father are, in fact, maybe what I was subconsciously thinking about when I said he was doing a better job in this movie.
Yeah, and I think, you know, you were talking about your character setup moments. I do think one thing that the movie does do is it does slow down and give Will and Bill those moments together. I really like that. I liked everything where they're just on the ship kind of talking together. I love the dice game between the three of them, even though I don't think the movie does a great job of like allowing you to understand what actually is happening there.
I have no idea.
I love, like, I looked it up and it makes sense, but like the movie's like trying to explain to Will and thus the audience what the dice game means. And he's like, no, I got it. And I was like, wait a minute, Gore. I don't got it.
Yeah, I've never heard of this before.
But I don't think it matters because I do think the actors do a good job of playing the emotion of the scene, regardless of, you know, what the hell is going on with that dice game.
Sure. No. I mean, you know whether it was good or bad, right? And that's all that matters.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like when you're watching, you know, 007 play poker or whatever. It's not like you're really able to keep track of all the complicated like things that are happening there either. You're just reacting to how the characters are reacting. So.
Though I will say in the Casino Royale, there are two characters in the background whispering to each other what's happening on the card table, literally for the audience's benefit.
That's true. That's a good point. But yeah, so like the thing about this movie is the two things that jump to your mind about the first movie are complicated backstabbings and mutual like multiple plots being enacted by multiple plotters, which are all crossing and double crossing each other. And then also giant awesome looking set pieces, naval battles, sword fights, and mixed with cool special effects. And this movie does all of that except does it like twice as big.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I will say I did feel, I think the actual ship versus ship combat, I think, is missing from this one as much because there's so much of the Kraken. You do get a little bit of the Flying Dutchman versus the Black Pearl, but it felt a lot smaller to me than the second one. Of course, the reason is because they're saving all that for At World's End, which has the most absurd ship battle in the world, which I can't wait to talk about. But it's mostly because of the Kraken. And I wonder if they almost realized that problem, because the third movie basically opens with, oh no, the Kraken's dead now. It's dead.
Right.
At the end. We don't have to deal with that anymore. But the Kraken stuff works so well, though. Like, it's so good. I think we see it there's two different moments. Like we see it take down a ship. Will learns about it and then uses that to kind of defeat it temporarily. And those scenes, I think they work really, really well. There's a game I played. What is it called? There's a mystery game, like an independent game on Steam where you're like investigating death on a ship. And part of it is they got attacked by a Kraken. And you could tell it's taken, some of the imagery of that is taken exactly from this movie. Because it's just so distinct and wonderful. Like the tentacles like slowly going up the side of the ship and then like going in and grabbing the cannons out of the cannon holes. It's just all perfect.
Yeah. Yeah, right. I mean, that's yet again, the distinctive thing about Verbinski is like the shot to shot carrying forward of your attention and sort of continually finding clever, novel ways to convey information and sort of preserve the integrity, the feeling of like the scene being a real event that's happening, using 1,000 little details. Like I love, when one of the tentacles is going up it's going up the side of the ship and it's, you see each of the individual suckers sort of like catching on, I think it's a cannon barrel and going like flip, 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 flip as it goes past. And it's like, that's just the kind of tiny little visual detail where it's completely unnecessary, but it just gives you that much, maybe even subconsciously impacts you to convince you that this is a real thing. This is a real moment that's happening.
It makes it feel like it's part of the space that the actors are in instead of just pasted in afterwards, for sure. It's that kind of detail that really works. And I think that is one thing we can say from Mouse Hunt, from the very beginning. Verbinski has excelled at these largely cartoonish action set pieces. And I think this movie gets cartoonish to an absurd degree. And I don't mean that badly. Like I think the wheel fight is some of his best action work ever. Mm-hmm. It's so good. And like, you're right that he took the last movie and said, I need to go bigger. I need to go much, much bigger. But bigger means more complicated. And there's a chance as you go bigger that you lose something, that it gets too big, it gets too unwieldy, and the sequences have no momentum, they have no stakes, they have no emotion behind them. And I think the wheel fight is such a perfect encapsulation of everything that's wonderful about these movies, because you have three characters that all want the same thing for different reasons, and then you have Keira Knightley off to the side just noting how absurd they are, and they're so wrapped up in their internal struggle between them that they're not even stopping, even though they're on a wheel rolling down a cliff. It's just, I don't know, it's perfect. And I love the bits, I love the comedy bits that Johnny Depp gets to play where he's like in the mouse wheel and then trying to grab the key, and like I love all of that. It's absurd, but it all works. Yeah,
right. That whole sequence. I mean, I think there's several discrete awesome sequences that work. Like it's funny because we're probably just going to completely forget one of them in this conversation.
Sure.
Like the scene where they have to rescue Johnny Depp from the island where he's the cannibal chief. Like that's so inventive. Like the idea of them hanging in these bone cages and then they have to crawl up the side of the cliff.
And it's a race between the two of them.
And then it becomes a race, which was another thing where it's like you could have just had it be that they have to climb up the side of the bone cliff, and that's already tense. But no, we're going to make it a race, and then use the ball as another. It's another hamster ball scenario, and
it just escalates perfectly. I love how it becomes a race too, because like they're climbing and it was like, come on, men, we're all needed to man the Pearl. Actually, it would only take about 6 of us.
Yeah.
And then the music drops out. They all look at each other. and then the race begins. It's just perfect. That's a perfect Pirates moment.
Yeah. Yeah, right. I mean, there's so many great comedy beats. Like I love when Jack Sparrow like successfully uses the bamboo pole to like pole vault, and then lands perfectly and like smiles smugly. But then the fruit starts falling down the pole.
Oh my god!
And then it's like so perfect Looney Tunes, right?
Yeah,
it's like a perfect Wile E. Coyote beat. But it's just. I mean, I think it's funny because I never quite made the connection, but it's like Verbinski is sitting there saying like, how many can I get as close to actual Looney Tunes as possible?
Oh yeah.
in these action scenes without breaking it, without making people call bullshit.
And I think he succeeds. I mean, I don't think everyone agrees with this. I think it is a movie that is interesting in the way it wildly swings in tone. It's a really dark, spooky movie one moment, and then a rollicking adventure, and then a silly cartoon. I think he nails all those moments. I know some people don't agree, but I think he nails it. I love the silliness.
I mean, I love all of the stuff independently. I think that's one reason why maybe I feel like the movie, like I said a minute ago, insufficient buy-in to the characters, and then when the tone starts whipsawing all over the place, I feel a little bit of a loss of integrity in a scene-to-scene sense. But at no point am I like not enjoying the movie. It's just, I think honestly, the main part where I would kind of lose it is like there's a few moments where I'm just like, this has actually become too complicated for me to follow. Like, like when Norrington turns on Will in the middle of the sword fight just before the hamster wheel thing starts.
Mm-hmm.
I literally don't understand why he turned on Will at that point.
Because he blames, like, Norrington was blaming Jack Sparrow for all his problems.
Right.
And he's like, no, who's the one that stole your girl and freed me and who's the one actually responsible for all this stuff?
Okay, no, yeah, I get that, but what? But I thought he just wanted the chest. He really just wants to murder Will now.
I mean, I think he's just being an angry, stupid man. Like, okay. I think that's the whole fight is like, I think Jack is the only one going for the key at some points. The rest are just hitting each other with swords. I mean, that's the hilarious part is they leave the chest behind. The chest gets taken. And the only reason they get the chest is because Keira Knightley runs after the other two idiots.
Yeah, because she's actually paying attention.
Yeah. There's something he does in that scene, kind of going off topic, but I love the way he shoots those action sequences. He does this a few times in the movie where he'll lock the camera onto the moving object. And I think the most brilliant moment in the wheel fight is when he like sticks the camera on the spoke of the wheel. And so the wheel is stationary while the world is turning behind it. And that allows you a really good view of the people fighting inside and on top of the wheel. I love that shot so much. I mean, it almost breaks the illusion because it makes the wheel seem like it's spinning too slowly as compared to what it's spinning in the other shots, but I don't even care because I just love that choice with the camera.
Uh-huh. Yeah, it's funny. I didn't really notice that the spin rate is different, but
it's definitely slower.
That's funny. Yeah, that's great. I agree.
And that shows that he did it all practically, right? I mean, not all obviously, but that like a lot of the wheel stuff was practical. They built a real wheel. It was 18 feet tall. It weighed like 2 tons. They built that and they spun it and they put the characters in there.
That's ridiculous. I assumed that it was, a whole bunch of different kind of tricks and CGI to give the illusion, but no, it's a giant wheel. Wow. That seems dangerous.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure it wasn't, I think like it was probably stationary, right? And spinning very slowly, but still spinning.
Yeah. Right. Just the design, like, I mean, again, the first movie has a great aesthetic to it, right? It's like a perfect, like, Caribbean as we imagine it was.
Yeah.
may have never actually been.
No.
And like I love the aesthetic of the Black Pearl and everything. Like it's a very beautiful, like just the sort of opulent pirate ship type design. But in this movie, we like take it and then we elevate it where we have the Flying Dutchman, which is like a Gothic cathedral turned into a ship and then sunk underwater for 100 years to be encrusted with coral. It's just like every shot that takes place on the Flying Dutchman, you just want to like pause it and
it's amazing.
Look at the setting.
I mean, fucking Davy Jones playing the organ in the middle of a ship is like the best shot in the movie. I know I've said that like 6 times and I'll keep saying it, but like it's a gorgeous shot that just like you can tell how much time and commitment they spent on decorating this place. It looks wonderful. It's wet and creepy and yet beautiful. I love it. I love it to death. And I think the same goes for Davy Jones' entire crew. Like every single one of those guys, Davy Jones included, like the detail on him. Even Stellan Skarsgård's character, like he's got the one big starfish on the side of his head. It just all looks so good. and the guy who comes out of the ship just to give a little bit of exposition and then goes back in the ship.
Man, talk about visual storytelling, because then you realize that, like, well, what happens after you've been on the ship for, like, 95 years? It's like you're not just like a shark dude anymore. You just sort of start to become part of the ship.
Yeah.
At least that was the impression I got. But that's the thing, is it doesn't need to explain it to you. It's just like, yeah, it's reminds me of some other stuff we've read where it just like erodes your humanity until you're just part of the environment.
Yeah, it's awful. It's awful, and yet you still understand why people would make the choice. I love that we get the scene where, like, they sit down the shipwrecked men and offer them the choice, and it's like it seems like a good choice at the moment, especially for Bootstrap Bill, who's stuck at the bottom of the ocean.
Right. It's funny because you can almost believe that would have been a forgotten plot beat, right? But no, they absolutely do everything they can with continuity, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's a coincidence, a contrived coincidence, but it makes such perfect sense in the moment. That of course that's where he'd end up.
Yeah,
I love it.
Yeah,
and like, I mean, it's interesting, like the additional lore that this thing, we learn about Jack's compass, we learn about the Black Pearl. It was a magic ship before it was a ghost ship, which is an interesting wrinkle. We learn, I mean, like, I love the use of the compass to show Jack Sparrow's arc is so wonderful. I love when what's her name says, Jack Sparrow doesn't know what he wants.
Yeah,
it's such a wonderful beat. I think that's it's a smart choice to, like, take this compass that it really never made sense in the first movie, and it didn't need to make sense. Like, it was just fine that this is some magic compass that, like, we all made the assumption that it just takes you to the Aztec treasure and that's where it takes you.
Right.
But no, they're like, okay, we need a goal, we need a plot for this movie. What can we do? And they saw, the compass is one of the things we never really explained. Is there something there? And they built this whole story around that. And I think it works.
The one piece of continuity where I guess it's just worth a chuckle. It's not quite, it doesn't offend me, but it's just the idea that, like, the ending of the last movie where Norrington lets them go is just like, it's just like a feel good moment of like, oh, this is just a happy ending to this fun, rollicking, good time of a movie. And then this movie begins with, like, that was the worst decision ever. You're all fucked because you let Jack go, and this evil guy from the East India Company is going to use that specific moment. And I'm like, really? The funny moment, the moment that was like the lighthearted. Just, okay, whatever.
Yeah, I mean, Norrington's resigned his commission. They're all under arrest. Yeah, I Beckett as the villain is a really good one. I think he like. This is getting into the next movie, and maybe we should save it for that. But, like, he really represents the exact opposite of piratedom. And it actually, like, it seems like Davy Jones is going to be your main antagonist, but Beckett is sneakily becoming the main antagonist, and that will become true in the final movie, because he's like, even Davy Jones represents, like, piracy in a fundamental way, and the East Indian Company is the exact opposite of that.
Yeah. I think that's what is so wonderful about these movies overall. And actually, this is something that our partners over on the High Ground podcast talked about a bit, is just the idea that every character has their own motivations.
Yeah.
Norrington is his own man with his own motivations that make sense, and they actually change over the course of the series.
Yeah.
Davy Jones is a complicated human being, Octopus Man, with complicated with a deeply wounded soul, and he's acting out of pain, right?
Yeah.
And everything he does is consistent with that character. And then East India Company man Beckett is, yet again, he's not just a plot device. He's I mean, it's interesting because he does, as you said, serve a thematic purpose, but he's also his own man with his own drives, right? Everyone has their own, and that's what allows it, despite all of the complexity of the plotting and the double crossing and the backstabbing and the stealing of the heart from the bottle, from the chest,
the jar of dirt
from the island. Yeah. It doesn't, you never lose track of who these people are and what they want.
Yeah. I think you're right. Yeah.
And that's conveyed both in the script, and I think, as we talked about a little bit last week too, the directing, which directing slash acting, which are sort of combined in a way where you always know what everyone feels about everything, because the camera takes the time to let you know what everyone's reaction is where it's appropriate.
Yeah, I mean, I love the choices to show different reactions. I mean, the entire Keira Knightley, Jack Sparrow, Will Turner love triangle. It, like, normally shit like that would make me roll my eyes and annoy the shit out of me. But the way it's done here is so masterful because, like, first of all, you get it from who Elizabeth Swann was in the first movie. You know, she was a person obsessed with pirates and piracy. And like the reason she was so enamored by Will Turner to begin with is because she linked him to this idea of piracy. So you can kind of get to a point where you're like, okay, I can see why this person would be attracted to Jack Sparrow. I can see it. And then I love the way the movie kind of slow rolls it. Like I love when she is holding the compass and the compass arrow points toward him and she's got this moment of panic because she doesn't know what to do with that. I mean, it turns out the compass is just pointing right to where the chest is, but she doesn't know that. And so there's this moment of uncertainty. And I don't know. What do you think that kiss that she gives him at the end? Is it just to lock him up? Or is it like, is there something actually there? Some feeling actually there on Elizabeth Swann's part?
I think her character is great in this movie. And I think there is something there because she has successfully broken free of the restrictive, gilded cage that she was in for her whole life up till this point. But that doesn't mean she knows what to do with herself, and that doesn't mean she knows who she is. And so this movie is a liminal period of time, a transition space between the first movie and the next movie, where she becomes
a pirate,
like a
captain,
pirate captain, badass.
Yeah.
She's kind of always a badass, but she doesn't know who she is. She doesn't know where she fits in this world.
Yeah.
And that's the confusion. That's the conflict. That is the drama of her character in this movie.
I love that.
Is not knowing who she is. And I think that the side of her that is loyal to Will and loves Will being in conflict and sort of exploring the idea that, like, well, maybe she doesn't need to be beholden to Will if she's not beholden to anything else from her old life.
Sure.
But and none of this is verbalized. This is all just present in, I think the performance and the fact that we do give time for these ideas to breathe in the movie, actually.
Yeah. I mean, the movie opens on her wedding.
Yeah.
And the first shot of the movie is her sitting down in her wedding dress in the pouring rain. I love the shot of like all the china from the wedding, like being soaked, and she's there on her knees with her bouquet in her hand and the rain is pouring down. And it's like this super dramatic thing. And I think this, you could look at this trilogy more than anything else as her journey. Maybe even more than Will Turner. Definitely more than Jack Sparrow, because he's always a side character in these movies, but her journey to find herself. And I think it is a movie about her, about the love between her and Will Turner and them getting to the point where they can actually be together. And they have to figure out who they are before they're able to do that. And so it is fitting that Jack Sparrow is that agent of change once again. Why is their wedding interrupted? Well, it's because it's Jack Sparrow's fault once again. It's because of their dealings with him that come into their lives once again and rip their plans apart. And they will get married by the end of the next movie, but it is not in a fancy wedding dress, in a fancy fort with fancy china and silverware and all this stuff. It is a wedding more to who they are as people, especially who Elizabeth Swann is.
Yeah. This movie does give Jack a slightly more of a character struggle.
Yes.
Because it makes the specific point of, like, you were gonna do this selfish thing in pursuit of your own freedom, which is Jack's want. Is his freedom. Just, in a word, Jack's want is freedom.
Yeah.
But he continually is forced to do the right thing because he can't live with himself if he abandons people.
Yeah.
And that's ultimately, what happens, at the end, basically. I mean, there's a few times within the movie where he's faced with this dilemma between saving his own ass and risking himself to save the people that he's begun to care about. So that's which there's like a little bit of that in the first movie. I do think that it's there, but it's very much just like I like that it's a very minor element, that it's sort of in the background for you to appreciate but not focused on. And then in this movie, it's brought more to the fore because, you know, by the end of the next movie, I think he will have had something of an arc, actually.
Yeah, I don't think the Jack Sparrow from the first movie turns his boat around and comes back and helps them. I think that is something that only Jack Sparrow at this point in his life or his arc would do that.
Yeah, I think you're right.
So, and it's partially because of Elizabeth Swann's influence, because she sees something inside him, and I love the curiosity speech is so well written. I love Terrio Terry Rossio and Ted Elliott. I combined their names. Terrio. I love Terrio. They're sometimes really, really clever with their dialogue, and the fact that she kicks the shit out of him in that scene, that like he enters the scene totally confident. This is like a screenwriting 101 thing, right? Where, you know, like instead of worrying about the movie, you drill down to the scene and you say, okay, what is the objective of the scene? Both Jack Sparrow and Elizabeth Swann go into the scene with wants and needs, and she wins the scene. She totally wins the scene. She kicks his ass with dialogue, and it's so wonderful. And it really is the thing that sets up the moment at the end of the movie. And partially, like, what I love about her choice at the end of the movie is she does this thing to her. Will sees her do it, which is a good touch. And then you can see that the guilt of it is destroying her. It's absolutely destroying her.
Right. That's why she's willing to immediately do whatever she can to rescue him. Which, you know, that's the cliffhanger they leave us with. But I mean, the witty repartee is another thing where it's definitely present in the first movie, and then definitely present here as well. It's one of my favorite things.
Yeah. Well, I mean, all these things we've been talking about, I think, go to make it a pirate movie. Like, this is, you know, earlier this week we talked about the movie Thinner for Other Levels of the Tower, and we talked about how this is a movie about a person who is uncontrollably losing weight, and actually the losing weight part of the story has nothing to do with much of the actual plot events of the story. But this is a pirates movie, and everything about it is pirate-y, you know, like the way the characters talk, and I'm not just talking about the language they're using, but the pace of the dialogue, the wittiness of the dialogue. You're when you talked earlier about how everyone has their own needs and their own thing that's driving them forward, and the way that they're double crossing and triple crossing each other, and because everyone's chasing the thing that they want, they're chasing their own treasure, and they're willing to backstab or manipulate or maneuver the people around them. That's all piratey. And the thing that I love is that Verbinski and his screenwriters kept that in this movie and the next one. They always, that is the core of what these movies are. No matter how big they get, no matter how ridiculous they get, they are pirate movies in every meaning of that word.
Yeah. I agree that they're very great. You know, I honestly think I just sort of forgot how good this one was, and I just always remembered the first one as being so good. You know, that thing is happening where the more we talk about this movie, the more I love it, actually.
Good.
Which is funny because it's not like I started out not liking it. I'm just coming more to appreciate the things on a more subtle level.
Yeah, I think it is doing a lot of things. I think that's, you know, it's a giant blockbuster movie. It's a silly movie. It's 2.5 hours of sword fighting and kraken slaying and all these things. But I think I do respect Gore Verbinski and the screenwriters for trying to do something with this movie that goes beyond that. Yes, the script is not nearly as tight. Yes, it's definitely just half of a movie, but I don't know. I love its successes are greater than its failures to me.
Absolutely. You know, I think I'm going to have to follow up on these screenwriters because I've just looked them up, and apparently they were co-writers for Disney's Aladdin, The Mask of Zorro, another one of my favorite movies, which I would love to cover with you someday. Shrek.
Yep.
a few other things that weren't so good.
Yeah, I mean,
That's okay.
they've had some misses for sure.
Men in Black, one of them did uncredited work on Men in Black. Okay, whatever.
uh-huh.
Anyway, yeah, they seem like badasses, and so it's really no surprise that they did this fine film.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about Bill Nye? Because I think we have to talk about Bill Nye and how fucking amazing he is.
Oh God, yeah. I mean, I don't know. It's one of the classic, mocapped CGI performances where, in this case, like the voice brings the character to life completely, and then also the way that they're able to communicate his performance through his eyes and his mouth and his body movements is absolutely perfect.
And how they the tentacles like play into the performance. It's such a well done thing. It's so crazy to me that this was now 15 years ago, and this performance looks so good. This technology looks so good. CGI today doesn't look as good as this guy looks.
Yeah,
it's a masterful work. And yeah, I mean, like we could praise the CGI all day, and it's nothing without Nye's performance, which is just wonderful. He has the perfect cadence for this part. I think you're totally right that there's something so sad and horrible about this guy. And I think that the second movie gets into it in a little more detail, but I love the small scene with him where he's sleeping and he's got the music box. Okay, we're going to do something here, Matt, that I can't believe we haven't done yet. We haven't talked about the music in these movies yet. We talked about the whole first movie, and we didn't mention the music once.
Yeah, we do kind of a bad job of that in general, honestly, which is funny because I love thinking about the music in movies, and I love listening to soundtracks. I've mentioned that before.
Yeah. So this is a Hans Zimmer score, and I'm going to go out on a limb here and say these movies would not have done half as well if it wasn't for the amazing work by Hans Zimmer in that Pirates of the Caribbean theme is so good.
Yeah, I mean the theme is great. The swashbuckling sword fighting music, the more slow music for the more emotional parts.
Yeah, and does it sound a little bit like his Gladiator score? Yeah, it does. But that was a great score too. So fuck you.
Yeah. What's funny is the Gladiator score is actually well, not the whole score, obviously, but like the main song that everyone thinks about is actually a waltz.
Interesting.
I'm pretty sure this song is not.
I don't know enough about music to know that. But so the thing that got me onto music though was we get this music box song that is played when Will's trying to steal the key from him, right? He's sleeping and the music box opens and he like wakes up just enough to look at this music box lovingly. And then I love Zimmer brings the music box theme back the first time they open the dead man's chest with the heart in it. And it's such a really good touch. They slowly open this box, and instead of this moment of like exuberant joy at this is the quest, this is the treasure they've been working towards the entire time, it's this really melancholy music box score. And I think it's just perfect because that it links up exactly to this is Davy Jones' heart, and literally and metaphorically this man is heartless because he couldn't stand the pain and he's ripped it out, and it reminds you of that emotionally. It's such a good, wonderful beat. I loved it.
It's funny. I was literally also thinking about the way he reacts to that, or the way he reacts when they open the chest, and I love that, like everything about it, honestly. But like he starts out and he's like choking with rage, where he's like Jack, and then he screams the sparrow up at the sky, but and like you see all of his tentacles like flailing and clenching, as he's just like, God, it's. And again, like that's Verbinski having the nerve to center the camera on the CGI character, having this reaction to sell the emotional impact of this moment and having it work completely. Yeah.
I mean, like you have to have complete faith in your graphics team to be able to pull this off, right? Like at least in the first movie with the ghost pirates, like 80% of the time they were just dudes. And so if the CGI doesn't quite work, you're not depending on that CGI to land some of the most important emotional beats of your movie. But if the CGI on Davy Jones didn't work,
right,
then you don't have a movie.
Yeah, this is your Darth Vader. This is your main antagonist, and this is just to
So I mean, the confidence in this, or the willingness to roll the dice, to bet 7 6s or whatever. I still understand the dice game.
Yeah, was Bootstrap Bill's last bet or whatever supposed to be like impractically bad just to make sure that he lost?
Yes.
Okay.
So so basically, what happens is, I think we know that Will has 4 6s, right?
So my assessment was that Will actually would have won.
No, he wouldn't have.
Okay.
He would have lost, because Will had 4 6s, and Davy Jones had 2, and Davy Jones bet 6 6s. Will bet 7 6s, which would not have been enough because Bill didn't have any.
Right.
So like, your bet is basically like, I have 4. I bet there are at least 3 other ones out there, and he was wrong because there were only 6. And so Bootstrap bet 8 6s, which is an absurd amount. And once you bet the most and someone calls you a liar, you're the one that loses.
Yeah. Okay.
Apparently in the real game, you don't like immediately lose. You just lose one of your dies, and you're not out until you've lost all your die. But that movie can't go on that long. It's already 2.5 hours long.
Yeah, sure. And maybe they were just betting on that particular cast. Who knows?
I will say that Will Turner plays fast and loose with his eternal soul.
Well, he's a pirate. I mean,
when he's like, the bet wasn't the point. The point was just to see where the key was. I was like, okay, but your soul though.
Right. You know, it's funny because it reminds you of Jack, actually, which is fun because Will has always been struggling with the fact that he is like Jack and not necessarily wanting to be like Jack, because Jack totally did the same basic thing where he traded his immortal soul for 13 years of freedom. What's funny is you don't even need to see that scene to kind of imagine that Jack just like sweet talked and wheedled it out of Davy Jones.
Yeah.
In his usual way.
Like you can kind of maybe imagine it started with 3 years.
Yeah.
He talked him up to 13.
Well, because he doesn't, because it seems like everybody else, he's just like, you can either serve on my crew or you can die. That's the options. But somehow Jack managed to get 13 years of freedom first.
Yeah.
Which is just the most Jack Sparrow thing ever.
Yeah. I mean, he manages to give himself 3 extra days by promising 99 souls. And it's like, why would Davy Jones ever take that deal? It's hilarious. Yeah.
Yeah.
We haven't talked much about the part of the movie that's Elizabeth Swann convincing the dumb crew that she's a ghost, which is really good, actually.
It's very fun. Yeah.
I think one of the things the movie is doing as part of Elizabeth's journey is showing the ways in which she's really competent at being this deceitful person, and like she's really good at it, and not in a Mary Sue kind of way. She's just really, really good at it, and that is making her torn. And it's like this idea of, they went on this adventure in the last movie and they come back to Port Royal and they're like, we've had our adventure. And of course that's not enough for you, because it's not who you are, is the woman in the fancy dress in Port Royal.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think part of that journey is the fact that she's like really good at this pirating stuff.
Yeah. Right.
I love when she lights the fire and none of them notice it. And she has to jump down and be like, what's that over there?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's actually a fairly mature way of sort of grappling with the idea that it is in your nature to be a thief, a scoundrel, a liar. What does that mean? Does that mean you're a bad person, or can you be a good person who lies and cheats and steals?
Yeah.
And I think that also ties into her, uncertainty about how she's going to proceed with Will and Jack and everything. Like,
yeah, I mean, I think the way they get around that is they make piracy a symbol of freedom. As you said, that's Jack's end goal, right? He wants to be free. And so piracy becomes this symbol of freedom from oppression, freedom from the oppressive rule of law, from the monarchy, from the East Indian Trading Company, from all these shackles that tie us down. And so the way of they make pirate the opposite of that. And so we ignore the murdering and the cheating and the stealing and the and all the terrible things they do, and just focus on how it represents freedom and I think how it represents an old mystical way the world works, right? Like it's this really comes to the head in the next movie, so I'm sure we'll talk about it again there. But this idea that the old way is being paved over, like it's modernization is killing the high seas and killing the magic, and I think that's part of what the death of the Kraken represents in that movie, is that modern times are coming to kill what these people are, and they're resisting it. They're fighting against that.
Yeah, the magic, which that I mean, that was always the thing. I think when I was younger, I kind of rolled my eyes at, is the idea where it's like, this has nothing to do with anything that ever happened in reality. And now I'm just like, yeah, obviously this is a fantasy world where pirates are freedom fighters somehow.
Yeah. We'll ignore the stealing and the murdering, but they're just free. They're just free people.
Yeah, they're just free, and man's got to make a living.
We haven't talked much about Norrington, but I thought what they did to his character was really great, actually. He's a small bit part. He kind of plays one of the antagonists in the first movie, and he becomes this really complicated guy. And yes, he gives the MacGuffin to the bad guy at the end of this movie, but his role will not stop there.
Yeah, right. I think they knew what they had with that actor, and they made sure that they got some more dimensions out of him. Yeah, it's great. Yeah, I agree. I love it.
I do love when we find him drunk in Tortuga. He's still rocking his wig for some reason. It looks terrible, and his real hair is poking through it, but I just love that he's committed to wearing the stupid wig for some reason.
Sure. Yeah, it's great. I guess that just makes me want to mention the costuming.
Sure. It's fantastic.
Fantastic costuming. I mean, for some reason, the first thing that jumps to mind is that Jack loses his hat.
He does, yeah.
At the beginning, and then that's almost a symbol of him becoming like a lesser version of himself, where he's frightened and running and desperate. And then at the end he gets the hat back because he has made the right choice to go back and save the other people, even though he didn't necessarily intend to sacrifice himself.
Sure.
But he gets the hat back because the Kraken spits it in his face.
Well, it's a captain's hat, right? So he is becoming Captain Jack Sparrow again.
Yeah, he reclaims his identity just before he is eaten.
That reminds me of the wonderful playoff of like, well, I've only been captain for 3 years technically, and Davy Jones is like, haven't you been calling yourself captain? And which is true, and this movie reinforces that, because every time someone says Jack Sparrow, anyone that knows him says Captain Jack Sparrow. Right.
He's metaphysically a captain, even if he doesn't have a ship.
Yep. Anything else you want to talk about here? I think we've thoroughly plumbed this movie, but
plumbed the depths of it. You could
plumbed the depths of the movie.
Full fathom 5.
What?
Scott.
What?
I don't know. It's something that they say in those ton of French books.
Oh, sure, Matt.
But no, I don't think I have anything else to say.
So the undead monkey, my wife turns to me after the undead monkey comes out and is like, hey, Scott, why is the monkey undead? And I was like, huh.
So I can answer that.
I looked it up. So go ahead.
Post-credit scene of the last movie, the monkey comes back and steals the coin from the chest.
I did not see that on my latest watch.
I only stayed to watch it because the High Ground podcast mentioned this fact. So
okay.
So thanks High Ground podcast,
which is on our Patreon at patreon.com/doofmedia. If you want to listen to some other folks talk about this movie, there's a end credit scene at the end of this one too. Do you know that?
I did, but I forgot what happens in it.
It shows us the fate of the dog, which we left on an island being chased by cannibals. So he's okay. The dog is fine.
The
Don't
dog
worry about the dog.
Well, the dog's fine for now, but they always eventually eat their chief.
No, the dog is fine, Matt.
Well,
Don't worry about the dog.
See, I just figured that the dog, being like an incredibly wily dog, as has been proven, would somehow manage to trick them into not eating him.
Maybe they'll just like they were going to kill Jack Sparrow because they thought he was a god trapped in human form, and they needed to release him from the form. And the dog is his final form, so no need to kill and eat him. He's already achieved it.
Yeah, maybe there's like some specific mistake that every chief ends up making that leads to them being killed, and a dog is like incapable of making that mistake.
There you go. It's like in towns around America where they elect the dog as mayor.
Yeah, that old proud tradition.
I mean, it's real. It's not the real mayor. It's a figurehead thing, but they do elect dogs mayors in some cities.
It's funny because I've never heard of this, but I have
really
no trouble believing it.
It's totally real. Totally real. All right. I think we're done.
Okay.
I mean, good news. Our favorite character, Captain Barbossa, is back.
Yeah. That I mean, whatever.
It doesn't make any sense at all.
It's such a funny cliffhanger because you walk out of the theater being like, wait a second, she can just bring people back from the dead?
Yeah, man. It's okay. We'll learn in the next movie that is Calypso herself. So of course she can just bring people back from the dead.
Right. That's another thing where I was like, okay, all right. Sure, whatever.
You know, the only important part of Barbossa being back is he's back eating an apple, which like, do you think they had internal meetings about the apple thing? And they were like, all right, if we're bringing him back, we got to show him biting into a juicy apple. Got to give him his apple.
I mean, you were the one who couldn't stop talking about the apple last time. So,
well, it's just everywhere, man. Like every scene he's in has something to do with apples.
It's a symbol, man. It's a symbol of
life,
of his joy de vivre. Yeah,
of original sin.
Man, now I'm thinking about. Now I'm just really looking forward to talking about the next movie where they have to free Calypso or whatever, and he has to kiss Calypso as a man kisses his true love or whatever, and he just does a ridiculous ham job of it, and it's hilarious.
And then there's a 40-foot tall woman who turns into crabs.
Yep,
man,
it's fucking awesome. Can't wait.
Gore Verbinski goes. If you thought this movie was Gore Verbinski going to 11, just wait until you see At World's End. It's wild.
That was only a 9.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I cannot wait. We're not going to do that next week, though. We're going to take a little Pirates break because we have a Council of Doof episode to do next week. So I think just give us a little time to digest this movie, and then we'll go big in a couple weeks.
All right.
But that is the end of Dead Man's Chest. Good talk, Matt. I enjoyed this a lot.
Me too.
Doof. All right, Matt, we're going to conclude the show this week with a little game called 5 TV shows to get to know me. This was, like I said at the beginning of the show, a Twitter thing I saw a couple weeks ago. And I thought, hey, that seems fun, but I don't want to do it on Twitter because I hate that place.
Yeah.
So luckily we have a podcast that we can just take Twitter games and do them better because we can discuss them with actual nuance.
Yeah, right. And also I can narrow down my list of like 9 movies or 9 TV shows to only 5 in real time.
You only have 9?
I mean, I came up with 9 that made a difference to me.
Okay.
And I figured if you said some of these, then I might not also say them. But
I can guarantee that we're not going to have two of them at least in common.
I mean, I think it's also okay if we have 2 of the same ones. So
yeah, I think so. Do you want to go first? I think we'll go like one at a time.
Sure,
right?
I'll go first.
Okay.
Definitely number 1, 100% would be The Simpsons.
Okay. You talk to me about The Simpsons because we've actually never talked about The Simpsons on this show. So why do you love The Simpsons so much?
I mean, it's almost like it's just incredibly meaningful. Like I would watch it on TV like pretty much every night through all of high school, if maybe part of middle school too. Years and years of watching The Simpsons reruns, watching the new one when it came out on Sunday night for my whole childhood. Not my whole childhood, that's an exaggeration. My whole adolescence. Pretty much, and then like it just kind of coincidentally happened that I stopped watching at about the time that everyone agreed that it became bad, because that was when I went to college, and so it didn't really fit into my schedule.
Mm-hmm.
But I just watched a huge amount of it. Like I can quote like the entire show for the first 10 seasons or so, you know?
Yeah, like half of the quips that Matt gives on this show are just Simpsons quotes, and you guys don't realize it.
That's probably true. I don't even. I certainly make Simpsons quote. I am that guy who will make a Simpsons reference in mixed company, and it doesn't even occur to me that everyone doesn't get the reference.
Yeah.
Because to me, that's just the fabric of reality. It's like I also think like setting aside strict references, I think it's very much influenced like my sense of humor, and I don't know. I just think it's a great. There's just a lot of really. There's a lot of really great episodes. There's a lot of episodes where it's like, I mean, I'm starting to show it to my kids, and I'm just like going down the list, and it's just like, man, every other episode is like a classic that I know they're gonna love. And I don't know. We could do a whole show on The Simpsons easily.
We need to one day.
I mean, people do whole podcasts on The Simpsons.
We're probably not going to do that. There's far too many episodes. This is one of the best shows of all time. So I totally agree with you. It's not on my list simply because it was just not as important to me as it was to you. I mean, I watched it a ton, but this was a show that my mom did not like. So like she didn't like it, but she never told me not to watch it. But what happened is every time I was watching it and it got to a joke or something she didn't like, she'd just go, ugh. And like that just like infected my brain, and to where like I always felt a low level of guilt for watching The Simpsons, but I adored it. I loved it. It's so funny, and I know enough of it to know when you're quoting The Simpsons, but not well enough to like know exactly what you're referencing when you do make those references, which puts me in a weird place because like I know that's Simpsons, right? But I don't know exactly where it comes from.
Well, that's good enough that we are able to operate as friends, because
Yes.
If I was just saying things that made no sense at all the time, then you would be very confused, rightly so.
Yeah, sometimes I just take the quote you just sent to me and like put it in a Google search and then and add plus Simpsons and see if I was right that it was a Simpsons reference.
And it probably was.
Yes.
Yeah.
What is the best season of The Simpsons? Do you know that offhand?
No, I don't. You know, we're going through sort of randomly now, and just showing my kids kind of my favorites / the ones I think that they'll appreciate the most.
Mm-hmm.
Also the ones that have anything to do with like sibling stuff, because I'm trying to trick them into being nice to each other.
Nice.
So, you know, Bart and Lisa play hockey.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't know.
Okay, cool.
There's so many. There's such a solid run of good seasons in the you know, in the middle of the first 10 seasons that I have a hard time picking, honestly.
I think we should do a series like when we're tired of doing a director series for a while that is just all these shows. Like we just watch a handful of episodes of each of our shows and then we spend an episode talking about each of them.
Yeah,
that would be fun to do. That's a way where we could do a Simpsons podcast that calms me down, because the scope of that scares me to death.
That's a good idea. All right, I could keep going, but you do your first show.
Okay, I'm going to get the easiest and most expected one out of the way first. My first show is Buffy the Vampire Slayer. For a lot of reasons I've talked about before, this is one of my favorite shows of all time, but I think it's more than just that it's my favorite. This is the show that kind of got me into studying writing, because, I mean, for everything else about him, I think Joss Whedon is a very skilled writer, and he also collected a team of extremely skilled writers to be part of his writing staff. And this is a show that taught me so much about how to write well. And it's a show that is really emotional to me. I think one of the things, looking through all my picks, I realized how much of my shows have become important shows because they were important to other people in my life. And I just wanted to be like close to them in weird ways. And the reason I started watching Buffy in the first place was because it was my older sister's favorite show, and she's 4 years older than me, and I was desperately seeking her approval and to be around her as much as possible. So I watched Buffy because she thought it was cool. And then obviously my love of it like transformed from there. Still one of the best written shows of all time. Still like the highs of that show. There's nothing else like it in my head. And if you want to know who I am as a person, look at that show, look at how that show deals with its big, powerful, emotional moments. It's moments that make you cry. It's moments that make you laugh. It is me in a lot of ways. It is the way I look at writing, the way I look at the world in some ways. And it's really wonderful.
That's great. I mean, I wish I know you've been asking me to watch it forever. it's just you know, I don't have to explain to you that it's a big commitment to watch a TV show.
It's so hard. I mean, it's 7 seasons, 22 episodes a season, an hour an episode. You know, that's a huge amount of time.
But I do have to get around to it at some point because.
Well, I mean, I like the idea of doing it for this thing we just came up with right now, which is doing. But the problem with that is I don't know, like with The Simpsons, we can just jump in and watch like 5 episodes, right?
Right.
With Buffy, it's like, am I going to have you watch the first 5 episodes? Well, this first season's really weak comparatively, so I don't know. I don't know. We'll figure that out eventually.
Maybe you can think about it. Maybe there's a point that I could skip to without missing too much. I don't know.
I just don't want to ruin it.
Yeah, sure.
But yeah, that's definitely my first and easiest choice.
Cool.
So what about you? What's number 2?
Number 2 would be Star Trek: The Next Generation.
Okay.
Is that on your list?
That is on my list as well. Okay. Yeah. So we can just talk about it at the same time. Yeah,
I think so. So for me, a lot of it just has to do with it's what I would watch when I would come home from school for a big stretch of time because it was on TV. Mm-hmm. I think it's got so many powerful episodes. I mean, it's got a lot of kind of campy, not so great episodes too. But
the first season,
the whole first season. I mean, but there are so many great, powerful episodes. Jean-Luc Picard, like we joke about it, but like I do have a little Jean-Luc Picard sitting on my shoulder, who frowns at me when I make poor decisions. And he's sort of that character and the way that character thinks and sees the world and judges right from wrong. That is the way I like to think that I judge right from wrong.
Yeah. We made the "What would Jean-Luc Picard do" joke on We've Got Worm, and we're viciously mocked for it because everyone liked to point out the 1 or 2 episodes where he makes the wrong moral choice. And I'm just like, that's because he's a human being. Well, he's still a better human being than I am.
I mean, honestly, it's also because it's a TV show being written by a whole bunch of different writers.
Sure.
And sometimes they don't quite understand that character, or they just need him to make a choice so that the next thing can happen.
Yeah.
But pretty consistently. And then there's a few standout episodes that are really just about, you know, him and his just integrity.
I mean, those episodes are my favorite of the show. I think the Four Lights episode, the one I can't remember, I don't remember the names of these episodes, but the one where he gets a chance to undo the getting stabbed when he was a kid.
Yeah.
That stuff, like that's some of the best work the show does. It's wonderful. I put The Next Generation as well because if I watched Buffy because of my sister, I watched The Next Generation because of my dad, because my dad was a huge Star Trek person. I think my dad will always love the original series more because that's the one he grew up with. Mm-hmm. But this was just like, when I was growing up, this is the Star Trek that was on, and he was watching it, and so I was watching it, and so this just always was my series. And I just finished a rewatch, or actually I'll just call it a watch, of the original series for the first time, and I adore that show. I really do. It's a lot of fun. But this is my Star Trek and always will be my Star Trek. And I think you're absolutely right that there's definitely a part of me that is my image of what I think Jean-Luc Picard is. And I use that compass to make choices in my life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I it's funny because like between The Simpsons and Next Generation, like if you haven't seen those shows, I do feel like this isn't me being judgmental. It's just like I feel like you're missing a huge amount of cultural context to that I have difficulty communicating beyond. You know, like sure. not because I need to be able to reference those specific things, but it's like this is probably a bit silly, right? On some level, it's a bit silly because we're all humans. we all exist in the same milieu, but like those 2 shows. Honestly, on my list of shows, those 2 shows are way, way above all of the others in terms of how important they are to me.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of the idea of the question is, if you want to understand who Matt is, these are where you start, right?
Yeah.
I'm totally with you. I think like the cast of supporting characters in The Next Generation, as compared to the original series, is so much better as well. Like the thing about the original series that I didn't quite realize is it's really just the Kirk, Spock, and McCoy show. Mm-hmm. I mean, like they definitely elevated Scotty in the later seasons when they realized people liked him so much. But even like Sulu and Chekhov and Uhura, like they're in the show, but they really rarely have. I think each of them get like one episode that's kind of about them, maybe, and that's about it. Whereas I think The Next Generation does a really good job of exploring its cast of characters, and each of them get their own centric episodes outside of just like the main three.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, each of those characters, even Riker or Troy or whatever, like they all have like a great, at least one great side episode that's just about them.
Yeah. Also, Beverly Crusher was the first woman I ever fell in love with, and all women will be judged against her for the rest of my life.
Understandable.
All right. You want to go number 3?
Yeah, it's your turn,
I guess, right?
Well, I'm not going to be picky. Yeah, let's do your turn. Yeah.
Okay. So I wanted to put a sitcom on this list because I actually love the standard multicam sitcom formula. I love it. I know it's not as popular anymore, but it's like that was my jam growing up. Like to you, coming home and watching The Simpsons was me coming home and watching whatever sitcoms they played reruns of over and over again right before like the 6 o'clock news. That's what I did. And I had a lot of trouble coming up with the one that was the most me. Like I watched a shit ton of Frasier. I loved that show so much, but I think I landed on, and this might not be a popular opinion, but I think my number 3 is just going to be Friends, because I think Friends is the sitcom I've watched and rewatched the most amount of times. And I think if you want to understand my sense of humor, a lot of it comes from that show, which I just finished a rewatch of. And problematic 90s stuff aside, it's a very funny show. It's actually a very funny show. The writing on that show is really witty. Obviously, as you get later into the seasons, the characters become caricatures. They're not people anymore. But like those first few seasons, it's really good. And it's really funny. And I don't know, like there's something, it's the show that I used to imagine what adulthood would be like. And of course, not true at all. But I think every friendship I've had in my life has been in some way chasing the ideal of having a close-knit group of friends that would just hang out all the time like that. And I don't know, it's a huge show to me. I just got to watch the reunion special that was on HBO Max, which is wild because they're all so old. They're so old.
Oh my god. Yeah, that's great. I mean, it's funny because I almost feel like I relate to this show the way you relate to The Simpsons, where like, yeah, I think I watched a lot of it, but not religiously, and I don't think I've watched the whole thing, not by far. And I did like it. I think it's funny, although you will sometimes make references to things in Friends, and I'm just like,
yeah. Sorry. It's like on this rewatch that we did in 2020, because we watched like 4 sitcoms from beginning to end over the course of pandemic year. I realized how much of my comedy is just stolen from Friends, and I've forgotten it. Like some of the things I say, or I'm just like, oh yeah, that was a Friends thing, and I just forgot that. Of course, like Chandler was my comedy person because that was a awkward, goofy white guy, and like he's representative of awkward, goofy white guys everywhere.
Yes. The audience insert. Yes. Awesome. Yeah, that's great. That's great. I mean, I think I sort of knew that, but I don't know if I would have necessarily put that on your list, just because I you definitely do refer to Friends.
Yeah, there's part of me that feels judgmental about that to myself. You know, like there's part of me that when I was making this list, it popped into my head, and then I was like, no, I can't put that. I will be judged if I put that. But if I'm being entirely honest to myself, I have to. Like there's really part of me that wanted to put Frasier instead, because that seems like the more intellectual sitcom. Although I did a Frasier rewatch a couple of years ago, and that's a great fucking show. I love that show. But
yeah, I mean, maybe
Friends.
we could just, like a brief sidebar about how I think it is somewhat fair to just kind of have a generic sitcoms category.
Yeah.
Because like, I don't think I would ever put Seinfeld on my list of top 5 shows that affected me, but it would also be totally true to say that Seinfeld affected me, as did a bunch of other sitcoms, many of which I probably totally forgotten about until you remind me, and I'm like, oh yeah, I watched 100 episodes of that one, but I forgot about it because I don't know, it wasn't part of my soul like The Simpsons is. But yeah, I mean, sitcoms are a great piece of the entertainment ecosphere, which so I'm sort of glad that you have represented it this way.
This was why, by the way, I liked WandaVision so much. Because sitcoms are so important to me. And I don't know if we've lost that in TV. I think they're different now, right? Like, we don't do multicam film before a live studio audience sitcoms anymore. Like, except for like The Big Bang Theory, which fuck that show. That's like a bad version of this. But like, I think like the modern versions of these things are like, there was a show called You're the Worst on FX that I really enjoyed. New Girl is a show from I think 5-6 years ago now that I really, really loved. New Girl a lot. How I Met Your Mother, despite how it ended, was like just Friends again, but a little bit more modernized, and I enjoyed that show a bit. It's just like it's changed, but the central core idea of like the ensemble cast of characters, I love those. I love them.
I mean, I'm now just remembering Home Improvement was another show I watched a ton of.
Oh yeah, I watched a ton of Home Improvement. I mean, Boy Meets World is, I guess, not really sitcom. I guess you could, I don't know, kind of, maybe. I don't know. I mean, we watched Cheers. I think it was canceled when I was born, but like we watched Cheers reruns all the time.
Yeah, another show that was it's on my list of 8, or yeah, it is 8. I don't know why I said 7 earlier. My list of 8 was King of the Hill, which I don't think I'm going to put forth as one of my 5. I'm just mentioning it here because it's a cartoon, but I think it sort of fits this mold as well.
Did you watch Everybody Loves Raymond? I watched so much Everybody Loves Raymond.
No, I didn't watch much of it. Not much at all. But that's another one that definitely fits the mold, right? It's sort of like a funnier Home Improvement. Sorry, Tim Allen.
Well, I don't think you need to apologize to Tim Allen. He's kind of a dick, but he's like, you have to be a huge dick to be basically fired from playing Buzz Lightyear, and that's what's happened.
That's true.
You've been replaced by Captain America, Tim Allen. I'm sorry.
That's hilarious.
Man, the problem with Everybody Loves Raymond is I can't stop hearing people's impressions of Ray Romano, and every time I think about the show, all I can hear is people doing like the nasally Ray Romano impression.
It's not that bad. Yeah,
it's not that bad, but it just ruins the show for me in my mind.
Yeah.
All right, so that's my third.
Okay. Third is it's time for my third, right?
Yes, because I've given 3 because we had one that was the same. Yeah.
Yes. So I think I'm gonna pick something from more recent days, kind of the obvious one for me, which would be Breaking Bad.
Okay, this is also on my list.
Which it's just a perfect show, and it's I don't know, man, where to start with Breaking Bad. Like it's one of those things where I think I learned a lot about storytelling from it. I think I learned a lot about how to do, just like general storytelling and also serialized storytelling. I think the roller coaster ride that it takes you on, and how much you care about these characters and how invested you are in it. I don't watch a ton of TV, but I don't think I've ever, encountered anything that really kind of affected me that much.
Yeah. Like I said, also on my list, I think you can draw a line from Breaking Bad to the fact that we're sitting here right now talking in front of microphones, at least from my perspective, because if Buffy is the show that like taught me to appreciate storytelling, Breaking Bad is the show that made me want to study it. It really did. And I took that and went to movies because I liked watching movies, but it's a television show that I think is some of the sharpest writing and taking that writing and bringing it to a visual medium I've ever seen. I've watched the pilot like 6 times because I have like 12 times over the last few years pondered doing a YouTube show analyzing Breaking Bad episode by episode. I've committed to it like 3 times and then just got overwhelmed by it because it's just, there's a lot of episodes and the idea of doing that is just daunting to me. So I watched the pilot a bunch, and like The thing about Breaking Bad that everyone says, or not everyone, but a lot of people says, is, oh, the first season's trash. It doesn't start getting good till later. Like, I've had people I've recommended to the show say they almost quit because they were just not enjoying the first season. And so I went to this pilot like expecting to be disappointed. It's like one of the best pilots ever written.
Mhm.
It's so fucking good in like visually. It's so fucking good. Vince Gilligan just wrote and directed the shit out of this thing. I was blown away by how much this pilot does in 42 minutes to set up who Walter White is as a character, to set up the stakes, the situation, and everything that is in the end of the show is there in the first episode. It's all there.
Mhm.
And this is a different type of storytelling, right? This is serialized storytelling. These episodes are not quite episodic. They are mostly serialized.
Yeah.
But it and which is not to say that they knew where the show was going to go the entire time. It's still TV. They're still like allowing the show to evolve on its own, but they had the core idea of what this character was going to be from the very beginning, and they stayed true to that all the way through to the very end.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you're right. I think you have to be kind of there for the kind of offbeat thing that they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's a weird show, right? It's a, stuff like, the gray flash forward things in that one season, or just the whole I guess I don't want to spoil it for people, actually, because I actually love it so much that I'm like, still don't want to spoil it. But like, there's certain things where it's like that, like, unless you're watching the show, in my opinion, correctly, you'll be like, that's not very realistic. And I'm just like, no, this is not. You're not watching it correctly. It's not like yeah, maybe it's not realistic, but like this is about this. I don't know how to say it exactly. Like it's like transcending realism and entering this like operatic level of melodrama, where you have to do stuff like that,
Oh yeah,
I don't know if you know what I'm talking about.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Okay.
And we can't say. I know the show's been over for a while, but yeah, it would break my heart to spoil this show for someone that wanted to watch it and hasn't gotten the opportunity yet.
But I guess I can I can see people not loving it immediately and maybe never really taking to it. But it's just like, I think it's one of those things that really rewards you giving it the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah, and I think it's a show that rewards study. I really do, which is why I want to do my damn thing where I study it, because I think there's stuff to talk about in every single episode, to where you could do a 15-minute YouTube video about every single episode of this damn show. It just terrifies me to take that on, so I've been avoiding it. But there's a big part of me that wants to.
Yeah,
there's a lot to say.
Yeah.
I will also say Better Call Saul, the spinoff that should not be good, is also amazing. I'm still a season behind. I need to catch up, but there are times when that show gets better than Breaking Bad in some ways, like in just the sheer skill on display in episode to episode. It's fucking amazing. And it's like, why how could you pull that off? Like, it's ridiculous. And yet here we are. Better Call Saul, amazing show.
Yeah, I God, I keep telling myself I'm like saving that for the right time or some bullshit.
It's coming to an end. I think we're on the final season here.
Okay, well, maybe now's the right time.
Yeah. All right. So I only have one left because two of mine were also two of yours. So you want to do your last one, and then, or how many more do you have?
I actually have two left, but
okay, give one of yours, and then I'll give one mine, and then we'll conclude on yours.
Okay. I'm having trouble picking, honestly. I think I'm going to go with X-Files for one of them.
Okay.
And this is basically, I think, another thing that has impacted the way I think about storytelling quite a bit, because I've said to you a million times that I don't like horror.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm pretty sure I've watched like every episode of the X-Files, which is weird when you think about it. And I would even like I would sort of like dread watching the X-Files but like I would watch it anyway, because I don't know, like horror it has that pull, right?
Sure.
It draws you in, and you don't know what you're going to get, right? You have no idea what you're going to get. You don't know what you're going to feel. And I watched it when I was, not a little kid, but a young enough kid that it scared the shit out of me. Like when you watch the Fluke Man episode, you don't want to take a dump for 2 weeks. You're afraid you're going to get bitten on the ass by a monster. It I don't know if it taught me a lot in terms of like character writing, because I don't know if that's present at all.
Sure.
But just in terms of like tone and how to create scary situations and monsters and stuff like that. That was a big thing for me. And honestly, maybe this is like why I don't like horror, is because I scared myself so much as a younger person that I was just like burned myself out. I don't know, man. It's that's kind of why I hesitated to put it on my list, because it has a very special place in my heart, but ultimately there's this kind of a ambivalence, because it's like I love it, but I don't know if I ever want to watch it again,
Sure. Yeah. I've watched many an X-Files episode, but I've definitely not watched the whole series all the way through. And it's one of those things where I enjoyed every episode that I watched, but for some reason it never became appointment viewing for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know why. There was nothing particularly wrong with the show. I guess I was just watching other things.
I mean, honestly, I think it's just that my parents watched it. It was appointment viewing for the family, and thus it was appointment viewing for me.
Yeah, how much of the shows that are most important to you are important to you because of that very fact? Like that's so true with everything.
Yeah, right.
I don't think my parents watched that show.
Yeah. So I don't have a whole lot more to say about that, but I'll just leave that there.
Awesome. I would love to watch a handful of X-Files episodes with you and do a podcast on it.
All right. Yeah, sure. Sounds good.
All right, you ready for my last one, Matt?
Yes.
You're gonna love it. You're gonna like it. My fifth one is it's Lost, baby. It's got to be Lost.
You're going to make me watch Lost, aren't you?
I'm going to make you watch.
This was all a ploy to make me watch Lost. I understand now. God damn
it's the long con. I think so. Like if I look at Buffy, I look at Buffy as an example of this kind of episodic / serialized storytelling in its infancy. And I look at Breaking Bad. I look at, Star Trek, The Next Generation is a fully episodic show. Buffy is kind of this hybrid between episodic storytelling with a serialized story running over the top of it. Breaking Bad is full serialized storytelling. And I think Lost is the best example of a hybrid of the two. There, I said it. It is the most fully matured, realized example of a hybrid of episodic storytelling and serialized storytelling. I think the show is better than just about anyone and everyone remembers it being, yourself included. I think when you go into the final season understanding A, what they're trying to do, and B, what you're not going to get out of it, it allows you to appreciate what they're doing on a much, much, much deeper level. And that's not to say that the show doesn't have problems. I think there are some choices they made rounding out the final 2 seasons that betray some of the characters in my mind, which I don't care what kind of zany story shit they do. My importance is the characters. And I do think they fuck up some of those characters. But I love it for that too, because it is this serialized story in which they were indeed just making it up as they went along. And for all the clunkiness that entails, where it's sometimes they branch off in a direction and that branch goes nowhere and they just have to chop that branch off and head back to the main tree and start again. And it's clunky sometimes, but I think it's beautiful in its wonderful execution. There are moments in the show that bowl me over with how wonderful the character moments are. Like they've got some incredible performers doing great stuff. I think we all got distracted by the mystery. I think the showrunners and the marketers and everyone involved with the show allowed us to get swept up in the mystery side of it to the detriment of all of our viewing experience. But I think that's what a rewatch allows you to do, is go into it knowing exactly which of these quote unquote mysteries are not going to be solved, and being okay with that, and not letting it bother you that we didn't get the answer to X, Y, and Z, and just looking at what the finale does is it zooms back in to the characters, and it allows our characters to have all their character moments and allows us to say goodbye to them in a very fulfilling way. It's a wonderful show. And if you haven't watched it in a while, give it a second shot.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would actually be a fun project to watch, like you said, like pick a handful of episodes to watch and talk about, because I know that the show has brilliant episodes. I know that the show has emotionally affecting episodes.
Mm-hmm.
My complaints really all lie in the disappointment of the resolution, and I think it's very fair to say, like, try not to let that ruin something for you, especially when it's a long running TV show where it's like that's kind of the thing about TV shows is they can end unsatisfactorily for all sorts of reasons.
Sure.
They can end because they were canceled, and it's like, hey, that's not the storyteller's fault. So anyway, yeah, I'd love to revisit that in a limited way.
Yeah, I mean, a full rewatch is absurd. The only reason I'm doing it is because I follow a podcast that was doing it, and they're rounding the finish line right now. They're like halfway through season 6, and it's been an absolute joy revisiting this show, because I remember, like, you and I recorded a podcast. I think it was like our 3rd episode of our old show, in which we both just railed on the show for like an hour, and we didn't have nice things to say. I didn't have fond memories. When I walked away from the finale of that show, I was furious. And it was, and I'm not going to like say that it's entirely my fault and it's entirely the audience's fault. I do think the writers and everyone involved in the show cultivated this obsession with mystery. I think that it's you can understand how it happened, right? Like you watch your audience get swept up in the questions, and that excites you, and you love, oh, we'll introduce this little thing, and oh my God, look how they reacted. It's so fun. And you get swept up in that part of it. I do think the whole time that's happening, there is amazing character work going on as well. It's just the longer the show went on, the more pinpointed and focused we got to the mysteries and to doing the things where you pause the show and see what's in the background and what does that mean. It's like the first show that really got into this kind of Reddit analysis type thing. To its detriment. And I don't know, the character work in the show, like the character of Sawyer is one of the best characters on television ever. He's so fucking good. And what happens to him in the last couple of seasons of that show is genius. It's genius. And the fact that, like, what does the foot mean? Like that distracted me from the genius of this character. Like, it upsets me. It really upsets me. And I'm so glad I gave the show another shot, because it's amazing.
Sure. I mean, they also do stuff like what they do with Saeed's character, though, where you're just like, what? But anyway, that's I don't have any defense of that. Even on my rewatch right now, I'm still like, what are they doing? What are they doing? What were you thinking?
Sometimes, like, I mean, that's the thing about TV, and it's the thing that TV is such a unique form of storytelling. It's sometimes you just don't know what to do with a character, and you like try something and it doesn't work. And the problem is you can't erase it and go back and do something else.
That could be the fun thing if we're going to have a discussion is like do the doof thing and think about what were they trying to do with Saeed? Because I don't think I've ever actually asked that. I think I've just been like, what the hell is this? Like you appear to have just radically changed this character like under our noses and pretended that it was the same character. And then maybe, it's always rewarding to be like, okay, slow down. What were they trying to do?
Yeah. I think it's going to be so difficult to do that without watching the entire fucking show, though. But a challenge of a project that I would be interested in. All right. Yeah. So that's my 5th. What is your final show?
So I'm torn between Futurama and Game of Thrones.
Oh wow.
And the thing about Game of Thrones is that I don't have to say anything else in that sentence. We all know. but it's like, you
can't get mad at me for putting Lost on my list if you're going to put Game of Thrones on your list.
I mean, I think that's true. But the thing is, the point of the list is not to say
which is the best TV show.
Which is the best TV show of all time. It's to say what was important to you, what has shaped you, you know me. And the fact is, I was a Song of Ice and Fire fan long before I was a Game of Thrones fan. That's right. That's right, everybody. I'm the bigger fan than you.
He's the hipster of Song of Ice and Fire.
I liked George R. R. Martin before it was cool to be mad at him.
Yeah. That's why because my dog's named Ghost, and everyone's like, "Oh, from Game of Thrones," and I'm like, "No, dummy,
no,
from A Song of Ice and Fire,
no,
dummy,
from Game of Thrones, the novel." No, sorry, from A Game of Thrones. Anyway, I watched it religiously. Was super into it. Was really happy with what they were doing. You know, was a big part of my life for several years. I thought they did a great job for several years of that show. Then they drove it into a ditch, obviously.
Yes.
But that doesn't mean it wasn't a huge part of my life.
No, and it doesn't take away from what the first few seasons of that show did, which was remarkable. I think you're right. It's an interesting show to me because it's one in which I kind of learned how to watch shows in a lot of ways. Like I went through different phases where I would listen to podcasts talk about the show, different podcasts, and I could tell the ones that were hurting my enjoyment. Like there was this obsessive book readers podcast that would watch the show, and they just got like furious anytime they changed anything from the novel.
Yeah.
And like halfway through one of the seasons, I was just like, why am I doing this?
Right.
Like, why am I doing that? Why am I hurting my enjoyment of the show by listening to this podcast? And so I just stopped. And so it's such an interesting show because it came out and it started and ended in this big shift in television and this big shift in how we consume television and shift in like the podcasts as a medium became huge during the run of the show. It represents this big if Lost represents the beginning of a big shift, Game of Thrones is the culmination of that big shift.
Yeah, right. I mean, it even sort of partook in and was part of that big shift.
Yeah.
I think that's all. That's all true. I think I did learn a lot of about storytelling because Song of Ice and Fire had been, one of my favorite things ever for a long time, and I had studied it and thought about it a ton and thought about the storytelling and why certain things worked, and I sort of based a lot of my own thoughts about writing on Song of Ice and Fire, and then to see that adapted for the screen, there were further lessons in like, okay, that doesn't work when you do it like that, or like, okay, that's a good way of changing this thing without losing the heart of it, which is just a thing they had to do a lot because they have to trim a lot of stuff out. But sometimes that I really think for the early seasons when they would cut something out or whatever, they would usually do it in a smart way, right, where it keeps the emotional core of what they're trying to do.
Yeah.
And so I also learned a lot there where I learned what was important and maybe what was more peripheral, but had previously seemed important. They just don't have the real understanding of character that George R. R. Martin did. So when they departed from the actual detail of the character decisions, then it didn't work at all anymore. And that's almost the least interesting thing to talk about now. Like for a while we were all mad about it and that was fine, but now I'm like over it.
I'm so over being mad at the show now. Yeah.
I almost not quite, but almost want to rewatch it.
Yeah. I mean, like the mistakes it made at the end there are so self-evident that it's like, it's almost not even analysis to talk about them anymore. Yeah. It's just like, it's the basics, it's the fundamentals. Yeah. And it's much more interesting to talk about the ways in which the middle of the show was imperfect but interesting.
And it almost seems like they just wanted to be done with the show.
Yeah.
They almost just intentionally rushed it. They were just done. I don't know if that's true or what, but I think whatever, we can give them credit for what they did. Yeah. Correctly.
So we kind of jumped into this conversation. I don't think you had settled on that being your pick or not yet.
Well, apparently that was my pick.
I mean, it doesn't have to be.
No, I think so. I mean, Futurama is so similar to The Simpsons in so many ways.
Yeah.
That I would rather just be like, Futurama was also very important to me. Another Matt Groening creation, animated comedy. Yes, that too.
I emotionally lump them together in my head, and I shouldn't because they do very different things, and there's good stuff to appreciate about both of them. But I just kind of do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Question: have you watched Disenchanted? His Netflix joint, or Disenchantment, I think it's called.
No, I haven't.
I don't think it's good. It's not very good.
I haven't even really been aware of it. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't know, man. I have no opinion, but wouldn't surprise me.
I heard. I don't remember if I heard it got better or if it got worse. I don't know. I watched the first season and like half of the second, and then I kind of bowed out on it.
See, that's the thing. Like, I don't know. I genuinely don't know how much of The Simpsons is Matt Groening. You know, because I mean, Conan O'Brien is a really funny fucking guy.
Yeah,
and he was a writer on The Simpsons for a while, and then he wasn't anymore. And I'm like, okay, well, that's just one guy who was a writer. I don't know what he was responsible for, but I bet it was some of the stuff that I thought was funny. And then you add in the fact that there's a whole bunch of different writers who were joining and leaving at different times. Matt Groening is just one element in this equation. So
yeah, I mean that's the thing that's so unique about TV. I mean, like we talk about auteur theory in directors. I mean, we're talking about a director right now. That movie has thousands of people working on it to make it happen. And these television shows not only have hundreds of people working on them, they also have a whole writer's room.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, like different writers will get like writing credits for different episodes of the show, but it's usually, despite that, still the story is broken in the room. They break the story, they come up with the story, and then maybe the person who gets the story credit is the one that actually takes all those notes and puts them together into a script. And then they bring the script back to the room and everyone reads it and critiques it and discusses it and changes their, like, it's such a communal writing thing that giving one person credit for anything, like even Buffy with Joss Whedon, like, yes, Joss Whedon has his name on a lot of the episodes, but those episodes were written by committee.
Sure. Makes sense.
So it's one of the things I love about TV. I love TV, man. I love TV so much.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, because the reason why it can be so good is because those writers, they practice that thing you just described. They practice that over and over and over.
Mm-hmm.
Like they get really good at communally putting a whole bunch of heads together to really sharpen something to a razor's edge that just one person just maybe never could get quite that good.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
All right, Matt. So let's recap. What were your 5 once again?
My 5 were The Simpsons, Star Trek: The Next Generation, Game of Thrones, Breaking Bad, and
you can do it. You can do it.
What did I just say?
The X-Files.
X-Files. Jesus.
They're so important to you, you immediately forgot about them.
Well, I forgot which ones that I said. Yes.
Sure.
Yes.
And my 5 were Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Star Trek: The Next Generation, Friends, Breaking Bad, and Lost. And so those are, if you want to get to know us, those are the TV shows you should watch.
Yep.
I think this is very fitting because it shows the ways in which you and I are similar, where we touch on 2 of them, and then the ways in which are very different, in which I went one direction and you went another direction. I think that's really cool, actually.
Yeah, I think so. And it's funny because a lot of it is like, that makes sense, and then some of it is just like, that seems random. Like me with the X-Files, I still don't know how I feel about that pick, but it's like, okay, but it's undeniable that was an important show for me. So
yeah, it's something that just feels right, and that's my friend's pick for sure. Yeah. So we'd love to hear from you guys. What are the 5 shows that you would tell someone to watch to get to know you? Please let us know. You can reach out to us via email at doofmedia@gmail.com or on our Twitter account @doofmedia. You can find us on Instagram @doofmedia. And of course, you can head over to our subreddit. That's doofmedia.com reddit.com/r/doofmedia. There will be a thread for this episode, and you can let us know what your 5 TV shows are. And also you can just let us know what you thought of Pirates of the Caribbean: Dead Man's Chest as well. That wonderful movie.
Yeah, I really would like to know other people's 5 most important movies.
Me too. Television shows.
That's television shows, Jesus. If you're not already subscribed to this podcast, then we encourage you to subscribe and ensure you never miss an episode. You can find the Doofcast on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, YouTube, Google Play, and pretty much anywhere else podcasts can be found, including whatever browser you're on right now.
Yeah, you can find this and all of our shows over at our website, doofmedia.com. And if you like what we do here and want to support us, consider becoming a patron of Doof Media. Head on over to patreon.com/doofmedia and pledge $5 or whatever else you can afford. You will help us out. You will support every single one of these shows, and you'll get a bunch of cool bonus material, including our newest episode of Other Levels of the Tower, which is the show where Matt and I talk about adaptations of Stephen King stories. This month, we talked about Stephen King's Richard Bachman's Thinner. It's a movie.
It is a movie. Also, please consider rating and reviewing the Doofcast on Apple Podcasts. Every review really does help us get more exposure and introduces new people to the stuff we're making here. And also, it just puts a little smile on our face.
It does. I love those smiles. All right, folks, we will see you all next week. We're taking a brief break from Gore Verbinski to do another one of our Council of Doof episodes. This month, the Council has nominated Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. So that's pretty fitting, Matt. So next week, we'll talk about Star Trek II.
Awesome.
We'll see you then.
My name is Doof, and you'll do what I say. My name is Doof, and you'll do what I say.